feel free to tell us where you are right now in the chat. I'd like to welcome you. Loved the fact that we were able to listen to that song again by Marika and Patricia that was played yesterday. It's so inspiring, but it's such a catchy tune. So I'm here today to introduce the panel, Women in Education. And I'm very excited to introduce our 4 panelists who will be talking about all of their work and amazing stories. Please make sure that you let us know where you're from, your name and your organization, and where you're joining from. As I said, the Migration Summit 2023, organized by MIT Refugee Action Hub, which is called REACT, Naamel and Karam Foundation, is a month-long global convening designed to build bridges between diverse communities of displaced learners, universities, companies, social enterprises, policymakers, employers, and governments around the key challenges and opportunities for refugee and migrant communities. This year, we're exploring the theme of co-creating pathways for learning, livelihood, and dignity through virtual events hosted by participating partners around the world and some live events also. So on this panel, Women in Education, I sort of added empowerment and dignity because that's such an essential part and core of this summit. We will be discussing the work of 4 amazing women, as I mentioned, who are trailblazers in the field of women's right to an education and livelihood, and deals with SDG 4, Sustainable Development Goal number 4 and number 5. Let me briefly introduce our panelists because they're going to introduce themselves in more detail in a couple of minutes. Let me introduce Olivia Darby, who is the co-founder and director of Wonder Foundation, which works to empower vulnerable women and girls through education and mentoring in 22 countries. So welcome to Olivia, who I believe is in Nairobi today, at least for a little while more. Haley Smith, who is the founder of Lifting Hands International, an international organization providing humanitarian aid to refugees. Haley, I think, is right now in Arizona, just taking a little time off from her very busy schedule. Mohadessa Mirzai, who is the first female commercial airline pilot in Afghanistan. And with the situation there, she has quite a story to tell, and really excited also to hear her story. And then finally, but certainly not least, Julia Aduolo, who is the Refugee-Led Research Hub's manager for professional placements and coordination for the University of Oxford's Refugee Studies Center, Pathways. And she is currently, I believe, in South Africa and also has quite a story to tell. So I wanted to get started, make sure that our panelists have time to explain. Each one of them will have a bit of time. And the question I've asked or posed to each of them is, how are you and/or your organization empowering women through action, advocacy, or research? And our first speaker will be Olivia Darby.
Hi, thank you. And I'm so excited to be here with such amazing people from all over the world today. So to start off by saying a little bit about Wonder. Wonder was founded in 2012 by a group of young people, actually from around the world, many of whom had their own migration experiences. Our mission is to empower women through education and ideally to help people to lift themselves out of poverty through education and through mentoring, which we see as an integral part of the service that we offer. And how do we work? Well, we work with locally led partners, as you mentioned, and we're working with these partners in 22 different countries around the world. When we started Wonder, we saw it as an education response to the needs that many women have, their challenges of being able to find financial security, the issues that many young women and girls face in accessing basic education and then progressing that in a way that their voices are heard later and they're able to take part in all of the conversations about their lives and their countries and their communities. And of course, critically, to have agency in their own lives and to be able to make good decisions for their families as well. But over time, we realized quite quickly that most of the projects, if not all that we were working with, were affected by migration. Some, like our projects in Central America, are very much places where people leave to go and find better futures elsewhere, and they may return to either successful or crushed afterwards. All those families, all those young women are affected deeply by migration. The same, our partner, the Bay Tree Centre in London, is working in a community where they are either first or second generation, typically, migrant women and their families. And then we are specifically working since then with some very migrant-focused projects because we realised that this was deeply needed. So in fact, since 2017, we have been working with local partners in Poland to respond to the need for support for migrants there. So I think all of us are very aware of the fact that there are now millions of Ukrainians in Poland who have education needs amongst all of their many other needs. But actually, there have been Ukrainians in Poland for much longer than that. And people with concrete needs since 2014, the annexation of Crimea. And our partners there started in a space where there wasn't much support at all for migrants to provide education and personal support and access to employability skills and employment in 2017, mainly with Ukrainians, but also with other people from Central Asia. Our work in London with the Bay Tree Centre has been going on also for a similar length of time. And we're currently training around 200 women with access to English language support, but also to have personal coaching, mentoring, and integration support in different ways. We're working with a project that helps young girls, teenage girls who arrived in London and are not able to get a place at school immediately. Maybe their families don't know how to get them a place at school because everything is in English and they don't know much English, or they're digitally excluded. Or maybe it's simply that they're totally unaccompanied and they don't know how to access the system at all. Or sometimes they do have a social worker, but they're very overstretched. And we're also working in Spain, in Slovenia, in Sweden, with projects called Miriam and Fatima, to help women to learn the local language and to have access to employability, support for their families, and also to learn the local language. So we're doing a lot, mainly in Europe, to support migrants. But then also we realized that our projects, like I mentioned before, in Central America, but also in West Africa, in the Philippines and India, were all also working one way or another with migrants, either in preventing unsafe migration or in rehabilitating people who had gone abroad to find better opportunities, better lives, and had maybe been forcibly returned or had returned themselves, feeling like they had failed and not knowing what to do next. So I think our experience is that migration is something that is now affecting so many different people, so much beyond the numbers of migration that we hear about all the time. So in the light, I love how you describe the seminar and adding in those words, dignity, because I think that is one of those things that in the political debate around particularly migrant women's education, the dignity and the individuality of each woman who is a migrant, each girl who is a migrant, obviously this is our focus today on women and girls, is so often forgotten. We think that we put someone into a program and it's like a sausage factory. You put her in, and in 6 weeks' time, in 3 months' time, in however long it is, however long we have the budget for them to be in that program for, they will come out at the other end fully formed, ready to thrive. And we know that this just doesn't work. It's one thing if you have come from a place where you are already thriving and you've migrated and you have many tools in your toolbox. But if you have the migration experience that we know many women in our projects have had, you're not ready to go into that program and just come out ready to thrive. We need to make sure that people realise that they are valuable and valued, and that's what so much of the debate around the politicisation of migrant women's education so often forgets. Each person is different, their needs and their stories are all different, and that means that the education that they need and the support in those education programs and the exact offer that they need to be able to integrate and to build a thriving life for themselves and for their families is different from person to person. And of course that makes it more expensive, it makes it more complex, but it's also the only way to make it effective. If we're looking at it from a very kind of pounds and shillings and pence perspective, you can decide that migrants are not worth investing in and that they should have stayed in their own countries and all kinds of things like that. But we know that that doesn't work. It doesn't work for them to thrive, and it doesn't work for our societies to thrive either. People are with us, people need to thrive in order for all of us to thrive in the new places where they find themselves. Our experience is that we need to remember that migration is a very gendered experience. A lot of the people who come to the UK, for example, have come from very gendered societies. And that means that in our case, we see that there is a definite need for some people, not for everybody, to have women's only spaces, women's only learning, and places where women can really feel safe and able to form community and to empower themselves and each other. It means recognizing that many of the women who come as migrants have families and that their families will come first for them, and that the education that we provide them needs to recognize the fact that they have care responsibilities, and that within their families, their learning may not be a priority. And we can complain about this and say we wish it wasn't so, and we wish it wasn't so, but none of that designs a program that effectively deals with that fact. And we also hear debates of people saying, well, people are now in our country, they should learn to integrate, they should learn to mix with men should learn to mix with women. And we see this as a very negative way of looking at things that doesn't recognise women's own experiences and the fact that they deserve the chance to learn themselves. So it's really important that we take away the political and the ideological out of education for women, and out of also the way that we move women into employment. And we really listen to the migrants, wherever they may come from, the migrant women and girls who come to our communities, who come to our projects, and design projects that genuinely meet their needs, the needs that they identify that they have, and listen to the reasons why they want to learn, and understand the reasons that they are struggling to learn. We've seen programs which are funded in a way, for example, where women are then excluded from the classroom because once their child is sick and they don't turn up for class, they're forced to make big apologies for it. They then don't feel welcome. The funder says that their attendance isn't good enough, and so on and so forth. So I think our experience is very much seen when we see these women as people in 3 dimensions. We design programs that really meet their needs. We incorporate their experience and their dreams in the types of programs that we deliver, in the education that they want, in the employability support that they may want, the fact that family support and learning how to parent in a new environment may be really high on their list of priorities and educational needs. And we create an environment where they truly feel welcome. And I think I could talk for hours on this, but I think my time is up. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Yes, there's so much to say, but I think, you know, the essence of what you're saying here is we need to listen to those in the community, and we need to see what their needs are, and we need to start from there. And perhaps there are different norms or things that we could look at, but we really need to see where they're at first and make sure that we're catering to that before we move ahead. And I love the way, you know, it's such a welcoming and belonging feeling. I also wanted to mention just in general to the audience that if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll address them at the end. I'm making sure that we leave time at the end. So if you have any questions and you're afraid you're going to forget it, please type it in, and we'll take a look at it later on. Our next panelist who's going to speak is Haley Smith. Haley, welcome.
Thank you. Wow, it's really good to be here. I feel so inspired by everyone, and I'm really excited to share about my organization. So, long story short, like the creation story of Lifting Hands International is 20-something years ago at university, I became randomly interested in Arabic language. I taught myself the alphabet. I like all kinds of random hobbies, but Arabic really took a hold, and I ended up getting a minor in Arabic and spending quite a bit of time in the Middle East. I became a high school Arabic teacher in Boston for a couple of years, teaching Arabic language and culture. And when I quit teaching to be closer to family, I went to Greece at the height of the Syrian refugee exodus from Syria to Turkey to Greece, where thousands of people were arriving every day to Greece. I volunteered at a registration camp, which was basically a refugee camp, and my eyes were open, let's just say that. And while that was just a volunteer stint, I came back home and I filled out some papers and I started an organization. My goal was to fill one container of aid of things that people actually need, because you would think that that's a norm, but it's not. But within a couple of months, we had some posts kind of go viral, or somehow the message was shared. And now we have projects all over the world within 7 years. In terms of women empowerment, so we don't, at my organization, we don't have one specialty, right? We go to refugee contexts and we do fact-finding missions, and we ask partner organizations, and we also ask beneficiaries or potential beneficiaries what they need, what they want. And that's how a lot of our projects have started. For example, we have a community center in Greece next to 2 refugee camps that are mostly Yazidi, genocide survivors from northern Iraq. And when we were setting up our community center, we set up a women's space because the women wanted a space where they could go and not worry about their children, not worry about their husbands, not worry about anything other than getting together. There's a tea station and we have all kinds of activities. There's a children's space that they can put their children in another space. And so that kind of happened organically. In Jordan, we went and we were speaking to some Syrian Bedouin refugees who really struggle with food insecurity. And we sat down with them, and family after family, site after site, they were asking for goats because they know how to raise goats and breed goats. And they were also, the women specifically, were missing being able to have goat milk, make yogurt, cheese, like really traditional food that they absolutely love and are a staple, quite honestly, a staple in their diets in Syria. And so we've developed a program where we have distributed over 1,500 goats in the last 6 years, and thousands of babies have been born. And we've calculated that millions of liters of milk have been produced by these little goats. When the Ukraine was invaded, when the Ukraine war started in Ukraine, when Russia invaded Ukraine, It's early here. We went to Moldova. Some of our team members had some connections, had lived in Moldova, and one of my colleagues speaks Russian, the other speaks Romanian/Moldovan, and they had worked in the NGO scene years ago. And so when we went, when the war started, we went and we did some fact finding, right? And it turns out that so many local Moldovan organizations overnight had to become refugee organizations. And they are suddenly helping mostly women and children because the men had to stay behind. And so what we've done in Moldova is we've granted small grants, over 70 small grants to local organizations who are essentially helping refugee women and children. And they came to us with proposals, right? So there's all kinds of small grants have helped with education, building community, or establishing community centers, children empowerment, psychosocial support, even material support, hygiene, things like that. In Ukraine, we have 10 operating centers, which is basically partnerships that are hubs where we do both distribution of aid and also various psychosocial support. One of my favorite, are we allowed to have favorite projects? I think it's kind of like moms having favorite children. But one of my favorite projects in Ukraine is we established a shelter in Lviv, so Western Ukraine, where it's free for women and children to stay. It's 55 beds. And we hired a local person to run it. And I have visited several times, and it is the most beautiful place. I'm sure the women have their struggles, but they have built a beautiful environment of love and support. They cook for each other. You have two of the older ladies used to be pastry chefs in like the fanciest restaurants in the Soviet Union, and hobnobbed with Soviet officials. And you have young women, young mothers who are on their own for the first time. And we have so many success stories. And we've bought them a food dehydrator so they dehydrate fruit to create packets of, I can't remember what it's called, a very popular Ukrainian drink where you boil fruit, and they sell it at markets. And so we have some job training, vocational training. And we also, okay, I know I'm out of time, but look, one more project that we do is in Utah, in the state of Utah. We have a huge warehouse from which we ship all kinds of containers of aid. A lot of the aid are mom kits and hygiene kits, because we understand that in many cultures, finding women's hygiene in refugee contexts can be extremely difficult. It's very taboo. So we make sure that our partner orgs, our distributing orgs who are distributing the aid, are very careful to navigate the cultural taboos and to treat that subject with a lot of sensitivity. And yeah, I could talk, like Olivia, I could talk about this for ages, but I know my time is up. I really appreciate you guys listening.
Thank you, Haley. Yes, there is a lot to say about all the work that you're all doing. And we'll have some questions, follow-up questions after, so you'll be able to talk a little bit more about those things. But yeah, thank you. Again, starting with what the people on the ground need, and then figuring it out from there. And it's amazing. I mean, talk about empowerment from your side, and also empowerment to the people who are living the experience. So our next speaker is Mahadessa. Really interested in this one also, because this is quite a story. So Mahadessa, welcome.
Hello everyone, this is your captain speaking from the flight deck. I'm just kidding. Hello everyone, it's really nice to be around here, and I'm seeing all these amazing women. It's really a pleasure to see everyone here. My name is Mahadessa Mirzai. I'm actually joining you today from Milano, Italy. I've been in 4 different countries in past 24 hours. So it's a little bit hard for me to remember. I'm gonna start a little bit with giving a little background on myself. Originally from Kabul, Afghanistan. and I'm the first female commercial pilot in Afghanistan, the first female who was flying in the airlines, which I am still flying, but I started my journey as let's say from the time that I was a little kid, and I was very passionate about trying exciting things and challenges, and always like trying to be that child who wants to do something different. So I figured out later on that there is something as becoming a pilot, which is quite exciting, quite cool, and it's I guess at some point we all dream about flying. So I just took that dream to a goal and followed my dream. Of course, it wasn't very easy for me since we didn't have any pilots back in Afghanistan before. It was quite a challenging journey for me. I had to a few times, just going to make it short because it's a very long story, but I was rejected many times in Afghanistan for become a pilot and the training. But I joined a program, peace building and leadership program in Chicago, United States on 2016. And then after that, it was the doors opening, the doors of opportunity opening for me and opening my eyes. Because when I was in Afghanistan asking I want to become a pilot, they told me, oh, you are a girl, you are small, you don't have muscles, you cannot fly a plane. So I somehow not believe, but I was a little bit hopeless. But when I went to US, I saw this, I asked people, I asked about the training centers, and they were like, perfectly fine, you just need good health and a proper brain to function, and then you're good to go. We did the trainings, and short story, I finished the trainings. I was supported with one of the private airlines in Afghanistan, and I started flying there. It was such a proud moment for the history of Afghanistan and aviation, because aviation is a very male-dominated field. And having that moment in Afghanistan, especially for the country which was previously named the worst country for women, I saw this as such a big achievement for me, for myself, and for all the women in Afghanistan or around the world. And then, unfortunately, the fall of Kabul happened with the Taliban, and I went to Bulgaria. I had to do everything all over again. I was going through a very hard time, but I managed to start flying again, and I'm flying in Europe now. And I took this opportunity now that I've been a refugee, I've been up there, I've been down there, so I've been through a lot of things. And I thought now that I have a picture in the media, I can use that as a tool to actually have the stage to talk about women, to talk about our challenges, and to advocate for women, and to show them that, even we grow up in a very hard and challenging places like Afghanistan, where we don't have enough facilities, but once we are given an opportunity, we can grab that and hold on to it, and we can reach the points that we always dreamed of with gold, and we can be a very active member of our society and our country. So since then, I've been partnering with UNHCR. We are going through different seminars, different universities, having talk, trying to change the mindset of people about refugees, and especially about women refugees, because there is always a misconception about refugees that, well, we all know about the misconceptions, but what we want to try to do is I want to try to change that and say that we are educated people, and there are a lot of skilled and educated women among refugees that come into different countries, especially in Bulgaria, and all we need is just that little push, little opportunity, a little belief on us, so we can actually go on and continue our studies and work. So yeah, I've been doing that, and I'm also part of the Refugee Advisory Board, which one of our major topics that we are always discussing and researching is the women and their challenges and their education. We we make sure that all the women refugees coming to Bulgaria, they have all their access to their rights. They have enough knowledge about their rights. If they want to go to the university, we show them the ways, the procedure, how to join the universities, and if they want to follow up another skill, like we try to talk to the other organizations, and we connect them with different organizations in Bulgaria, and mostly working with UNHCR. And I know I'm running out of time, but this is a short story, but I want to say it's just what I'm trying to do here is to mostly advocate and stand for women, especially for refugee women, that we are educated and we are full of skills that just needs a little help.
Yeah, that support is so important, Mahadisa. It's really, we sometimes forget that the words that we say and the messages that we send, like you heard initially, but didn't really listen to, and then were able to get the opportunity when you went to the US, is really, really important, because we set the tone for what we believe about ourselves, which for women, especially for women who are migrating, is very, very difficult. And we know that women who are empowered around the world benefit the economy, benefit the society in multiple ways. So thank you for your extremely inspiring story. We'll hear from you again in a little bit, but right now I want to introduce Julia again. And Julia, I'm really interested in the work that you do in terms of research and so forth.
Thank you so much. And it's really so difficult to go after Mohadise, after just sharing her journey and really how she thinks about not just herself, but bringing along other women. And when we started, I was listening to this song. I love it when we're given a space to share our stories. So really appreciative of this space where we get to be ourselves, we get to share our stories, we get to share about the work that we're doing. So thank you all for sharing the work that you're doing. And before I speak about the work that I do, I think it's important for me to touch a little bit about my own journey, because originally from Kenya and currently a refugee in Cape Town. And really just to touch on how education gave my dignity back as a refugee. So yeah, a woman with lived experience of displacement, and I'd left home, the only place that I'd called home, due to instability. And my wish was to find this right home where I can dream again, I can start my life again. But like Mohadise mentioned, it was really so difficult to navigate life again. And I was really fortunate to get a free degree program through the global education movement. And since then, my life has never been the same. So I found my voice because I'd lost my confidence, my self-esteem. I regained my confidence and I learned so many skills. So I think for me, it was really finding that community that believed in me as a woman, as a refugee woman, but most importantly, that gave my dignity back as a mother, as a wife, as a sister, as a friend, and also a female leader. So I just don't do it for myself, but I always seek to just bring the other women along, because I know what it means to be down, like Mohadise mentioned, being down, and also having that opportunity to have a career that you're able to continue with that. So a little bit about the work that I do now. So I work for the Refugee-Led Research Hub as a course coordinator and the professional placement manager. And how it all started is I started off by being selected out of a pool of 900 candidates for a fellowship program that was for 1 year. So within that year, I had to do 6 months intense academic program. There was 3 months where I had to do research, and my research was around refugee women in Cape Town, and also a 3 months placement, which I did with the Refugee-Led Research Hub. So after that, I was really fortunate to get a job there, and that is what I currently do. And I love doing that because it's really working with refugees and also using my own inspiration and my own story to just continue advocating for refugee rights. So a little bit about the Refugee-Led Research Hub. So the Refugee-Led Research Hub is an initiative of the Refugee Study Center, which is at the University of Oxford. It was founded in 2020. What we do is really looking at supporting individuals that have lived experience of displacement to become leaders in the field of refugee and forced migration studies. And how we're able to do that is we do that by delivering different academic programs to a global cohort of students all over the world who have been affected by displacement. We also support access to graduate degrees and professional development opportunities. This is quite important because we also create opportunities for researchers who have displaced backgrounds, and after that, they're able to lead primary and secondary research studies from start to finish. So just to mention, we definitely don't have specific programs just for women, but we always try to curate an inclusive place for them. So a few ways that we empower women through action, advocacy, and research is one way is through our recruitment. So we are very intentional with all the programs, recruitments, and outreach. So at the Refugee-Led Research Hub, we have an approach where we actually admit 50% women, including other individuals in social groups that are underrepresented, and also 50% male in our programs. And really our aim is to create an inclusive space environment that is rich and diverse. We also bring our partners along where when we're doing our outreach, we reach out to them and we actually tell them that we are encouraging women to apply and other individuals in social groups. And so it's not just us saying that this is an inclusive space, but we also ask the partner organizations when we're doing recruitment to give recommendations or for learners, and strongly encourage applicants from women in the social groups that are underrepresented. Another important aspect that we think about is that when we think about knowledge production relating to refugee and forced migration studies, this space has really generally been led by people without lived experiences of displacement. And so I think just thinking about the Refugee-Led Research Hub, we curate a space that is inclusive for knowledge production. And one way that we do that is we encourage refugees, including women, to take leadership in their own knowledge production. And this we do through facilitating skills acquisition. So we equip learners with knowledge and research skills. And with that, they're able to go back into their community and do independent research. And that really helps inform some of the spaces like the policies that we have. And just to mention that our studies have demonstrated that researchers affected by displacement can actually lead independent research studies. And if you go onto our website, that's the link we're going to be sharing, you can actually see some of the reports from researchers that have really done great work in our communities in different countries, and how that information has been disseminated. It's also important to mention, I think for me, this is my favorite part. When I speak about this, it really brings me so much joy. So when you think about the displaced community and people that have displaced backgrounds, there are really very few opportunities for these people. And so the Refugee-Led Research Hub provides opportunity to access graduate programs in leading research universities such as Oxford. So learners receive, a part of the program that we have is where learners receive individualized support when they're applying for their master's or doctorate programs at Oxford and other universities around the world where they receive fully funded scholarships. And just to mention that we have a number of women who are currently doing their masters in refugee and forced migration at Oxford. And so thinking about decolonizing such spaces where people with lived experiences can actually be part of that space and excel in what they do. I have two more, and then I know time is really rushing, but one aspect that I do, I spoke about just doing the professional placement. So I think another way how we advocate for meaningful inclusion of displaced people within the humanitarian field. So making sure that learners that have been through our programs and they have completed, how they are integrated into the wider humanitarian policy ecosystem. So we do run professional development workshops where we guide learners in the application process, and it's really to set them up for success. But in a way, we're trying to advocate for employment rights for refugees, better pay, better practices at work, and also encouraging the refugees themselves to advocate for their participation and leadership. And lastly, just thinking about the mental health for our learners. So we make sure that we equip our students with appropriate tools and tips and topics such as stress management, inclusivity, and creating safe spaces. And I think we all know how difficult it can be for a woman. I speak from my own experiences where you've got to work, you've got to study, you've got to really find a balance. And I think when you think about the mental health workshops, it really helps you in terms of just creating a sustainable work balance for yourself and your family. And yeah, so I know I can go on about the amazing things that we're doing, but yeah, I'll stop there and probably I'll touch on other things when we answer the next question. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julia. I was reflecting on the fact that the panelists for this panel came together rather organically before the summit. And it's so wonderful, the representation that we ended up having here. And you can hear it from the different stories. So it's really awesome. Putting out the next question to Olivia and then Haley. So work in this sector with migration and those who are displaced is often siloed, very individual, like little connection, little few partnerships. So I'm wondering, how do partnerships with other organizations support your work, first for the Wonder Foundation and then for Lifting Hands International? And how do you find partners and develop partnerships that support your work? Because this is something that the summit is really keen to try to promote also through our year-to-year summits and then in between the summits. So Olivia?
So I guess I have two answers to this question. So our work is with locally led partner organizations. And we find those partnerships typically through recommendations, and then we do our due diligence process. I think always with partnerships, you have to understand what you're bringing and what your partner is bringing, and whether you're a good match for each other. Sorry, I missed my video. Whether you're a good match for each other in terms of being maybe of similar size or complementary skills and approaches. And then I think also whether it's a formal partnership or whether it's just really good stakeholder awareness, understanding what other organizations are doing that is complementary to you. Before I was here with you all, I was talking to some amazing organizations in the UK that are working to help migrant, refugee, asylum seeker children into education in the UK. Our part of the puzzle is a small part of the puzzle because we look at things with a gendered lens. That's our experience both in delivery of this project with the Baytree Centre and also our wider experience. They have a huge amount of very relevant experience, often deeper than us across the board. So we're bringing our little piece to that puzzle that other people have already been building for a long time. But if we weren't bringing it, it may be a longer period of time before people recognise that whilst the majority of children, migrant children out of education in the UK would appear to be boys, there's not enough data to say necessarily for sure, but that we do know that the experience of girls is different and we do need to look at it differently. So I think, and I guess my other point there is, I think we're really lucky in sectors like this that people want to make positive changes. We may be too busy sometimes to be able to look up, and that's how sometimes we end up siloed. But I think people are always happy to be asked, even if they don't have the time to collaborate. And I know I'm always really happy to hear from other people. It's such an opportunity to learn.
Thank you, Julia. That short gap was because I was taking a screenshot. I want to make sure that I get some of those. Well, thank you, Olivia. Yes, and I really, it's interesting of the local partnerships, and that's something that's really key. And the thing that you mentioned that struck me was the fact that sometimes they have a more in-depth knowledge or more knowledge than the organization, and so that's something that we need to rely on. Haley, I'm curious about the same thing, partnerships with Lifting Hands International as you grew.
Yeah, in terms of women and women's empowerment, we have lots of programs. So I'm just going to focus on one kind of as a microcosm example. So our community center in Greece, right? We have 200, 300 people coming every day for classes, for arts and recreation activities. We also have our female-friendly space. And within that space, we have 2 community volunteers. A community volunteer is someone who is a resident of the refugee camp, but is one of our volunteers. They wear our shirt, they wear our ID tags, and they are such a good bridge because most of the beneficiaries speak Kurmanji. It's a derivative of Kurdish that very few of our international visiting volunteers speak, and so they help translate. They help with cultural context, and also the women will speak to them, asking us if they can have certain services. For example, they wanted to learn more about their bodies, and so we didn't know that until our community volunteers told us. So our female-friendly space manager did some research, and she found an organization in Greece, a mobile org that would come to our center and do workshops on women's health. And so we've had over the years, we've had a number of organizations come, self-defense, legal rights, and it's just for the women. And it's a small space. And at one point, I think there were 70 women smushed into this space, and they absolutely loved it. We also do hygiene distribution, female hygiene distribution from there with they'll go into the center, we'll distribute them, and they have their little these special little bags where you can tell it doesn't look so obvious, right? And we want to respect that it's definitely a sensitive taboo. We also have within our own little partnerships, for example, our community of partnerships in Ukraine. We've seen them work together in a lot of ways. The best one, though, my favorite example, though, is Lisa, this amazing attorney, Ukrainian attorney who isn't working right now, but she's basically working full-time for our partner organization in Lviv, Ukraine. She did a book drive in Ukrainian and drove the books down to our program in Greece, because we have a library there, because there are Ukrainian families in the camps now. And she drove those books all the way down from Ukraine to Greece and dropped them off, and was able to meet with Yazidi women and have they were able to talk together about their experiences. And so we love when things like that happen, right? Where we have our formal partnerships, and then we have our kind of internal things. And I can't tell you how many times I've spent time in Moldova visiting our small grant recipients and just sitting with women and talking to them. And it's wonderful that we've been able to build that sort of sense of community, especially for women. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Haley. And from both of you, it's obvious that the local support, and then people, like Olivia was saying, people want to help. Finding out how that really does help, because in some cases when the help comes, it's not exactly the help that is needed. So making sure that we know from the local communities, from the people who are there, what are their needs, and then searching out and finding those people and sometimes they're just overwhelmingly amazing, like the woman who drove all the way from Ukraine to Greece with the books. And I'm sure there are other stories like that. This next question is particularly for Mahedisa. The key themes of this year's Migration Summit are education, livelihood, and dignity. How do your journey as a female refugee from Afghanistan and the opportunity to resettle and continue your work and studies in Bulgaria inform the pathways for other female refugees to have those chances?
I want to start it with when I left Afghanistan and became a refugee in Bulgaria. I lost everything. I lost my job. I lost my dreams. I lost my family. I lost my home, and I lost everything that we had. And it was not only me. A lot of people and most of the refugees. That's how they become a refugee and go to the other countries. And personally, being through all of that and finding myself again in Bulgaria, making a new home and accepting Bulgaria as my home, it wasn't a very easy journey, especially mentally for me. It wasn't very easy because I was going through a big trauma and I was depressed, I was very hopeless, and it was really, really hard to get back on the life. So I see that as my personal experience. I also at the moment I'm trying to focus more on the psychological and mental health of the refugees that are coming. Because aside from, yes, all the opportunities, all the help, all the assistance that they get through the different organizations, sometimes we all just need especially refugee women or refugee men or women, when they come to a different country, when they lose everything, they need a source of inspiration, they need a source of motivation, something that would lift their spirit and something that would give them hope to continue their life and to continue their journey, to make a new home and to continue their work, to be part of the society, to just even make friends. And that's not an easy thing. We sometimes think that that's just a simple thing. We need of course, those are basic needs. We need shelter, we need food. But I think this mental state is also one of the most important things, because even when we have all the basic needs, and if you're not in the proper mental state, the things are not really going as what we want to, and it's not working. So at the moment, I'm doing a lot of seminars. We're doing a lot of programs, meeting refugees, especially refugee women. I'm going and visiting different reception centers, shelters, and talking to them and actually showing them in person that I am a refugee myself. I came to here and I didn't have anything. I was just like you. And then look at me after a year. I'm back to my life. I have my home. I have my apartment. I'm back to my job, and I'm having the best time of my life. And I'm living in peace. And I'm really happy that I got a new home. So in a matter of 6 to 1 year, you would have the same thing. For you, you will reach back to your goals. You will be starting to work. You will have your home, and you will have your friends, and everything will be all right. And I think that's one of the basic things, the most important things I do. We also, as I said, one of the members of the Refugee Advisory Board. So our members are all refugees working for the refugees. So what we do, we mostly go visit different refugees from different countries, from Ukraine, from Iraq, from Syria, from Afghanistan. And we personally talk to them and tell them, in a friendly way, tell us about your problems, tell us about the challenges you have and what can we do to make it better. And if you have any suggestions we can do to make life easier, or to just even to build communities, to make connections, to have friends. And I guess what I did coming back to my job and flying again, it just gives that hope and inspiration that even though she lost everything, she was just like us. And I'm no different. I'm no superhero or anything. I'm just another girl who lost everything back in the home and became a refugee. And once again, I worked hard and I believed in myself, and I had help from different people, of course. And here I am after a year, completely fine and being settled down, living in peace. So this is one of the main topics I'm working on, because the mental state of the refugees, especially girls that are coming, it's very, very super important for me.
Yeah, thank you, Mahadisa. It's very inspiring, of course, but I think that the idea that you are advocating and being looked on and putting yourself out there as a model for where you started and being very honest and vulnerable about the fact that it wasn't all wonderful. You didn't go from one place and pop into the other place and everything was great and you just continued your life. You know, you had this sense of hopelessness and your ability to be able to connect with other refugees and tell them your story and show them the kinds of things that you needed to do in order to be able to push yourself forward, and that it is possible. And that also it helps when you have people helping and supporting you. All of that is really, really important. The next question is for Julia. Julia, your online profile mentions, and I quote, as a development practitioner, you have focused on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, supporting efforts to ensure that refugees and other displaced people are not left behind, unquote. The session description includes a reference to SDG number 5B to, quote, enhance the use of enabling technology, particularly information and communications technology, to promote women's empowerment, unquote. Based on the research you conduct in the field and the research of RSC, what are some ways women can use technology to overcome the challenges of displacement?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Such a big question. But yeah, I'll try to be precise and just touch on a few points that I think are important. So just thinking about technology, you know, right now technology is quite big in terms of how we communicate, how we do things. And the first thing is really access to educational opportunities. And that's through technology. So if I think about the work that we're doing at the Refugee-Led Research Hub, where all our work is integrated online, and that's across academic research and professional training. So we use like the Google Suite services and ensure that virtual spaces and classrooms remain a safe space for all our learners. So we always advocate for our learners to feel that that's a safe space for them to share their stories, to share their journeys, and how those virtual spaces could be turned into healing spaces where, as much as we've been through traumatic experiences, this is an opportunity for us to have access to education. And how do you use that platform to be more flexible? And I think it's really convenient and flexible for women. And really, for example, like when you've not been able to attend classes because of technology or internet access, one way that we always make it possible for learners to be able to access that is making sure that we have a recording for that. And so probably you could do like an offline recording, and when you're relaxing in the evening or having your own time, you can be able to listen to this recording and go through the discussion that was done in class. Another important piece is how WhatsApp connection is really evolving. So for example, at the Refugee-Led Research Hub, we have different WhatsApp groups for our learners. And it's really groups that the learners come up with. For example, they have a group called Gender, and in that group, they would speak about their experiences with gender in their workspaces, in their communities. They encourage each other to attend conferences or workshops that are going to help them in terms of understanding their rights. And so learners around the globe connect and speak about different issues. And they also share their own work. So for example, somebody has written an interesting article around gender, they would share that with the other people in that group. So I think WhatsApp being a very useful tool when we think about research and the dissemination of that information. Oftentimes when research is done on an academia level, it's really difficult to disseminate that information, even to the community itself, particularly for learners that are in the refugee camps or women that are isolated in their own spaces. So really looking at the WhatsApp as a space for us to be able to disseminate some of this information. Another important aspect is thinking about entrepreneurship investment. So where women come together and they form like cooperatives, they form like table banking. I think this is really common, like in Kenya, the women in Kenya. So they support each other to start their own small businesses, they invest, they save, they help each other and really understand each other. So I think for me, just using technology for connection and how they can be able to rebuild their lives from losing everything, like Mohadisa was talking about, where you've lost everything, but there's a little bit of hope beyond the label that you have being a refugee, having nothing, and how do you start rebuilding yourself? Also thinking about how you can leverage online for digital storytelling, trauma-informed workshops, where women can really find safe spaces and voices that are really familiar to them. So as I speak to Mohadisa speaking, I can also relate to my own experiences, and the struggles might be the same, although we're in totally different countries. The struggles are really similar, and how am I able to continue connecting with her through our stories and sharing my stories with other women in more of an online space where we can kind of share our stories. And also skills acquisition. I think this is really key. So we've got like instructional blogs or videos where women often share their skills. For example, a woman in the house is baking, and they would actually just tag themselves doing that and really giving all the steps. So how do we use these spaces to inspire other women to be able to pick themselves up from where they are, and whether they can learn a new skill, where they can be able to even develop their own YouTube content. I think we've seen other women coming up with their own content just from being inspired from other women that are doing that. And I think just thinking about how WhatsApp is really easier to use, depending with accessibility, because we know internet access is not everybody has access to internet. And the last two important things is really searching for employment or research opportunities or research gaps and business opportunities through technology. So how do we leverage those spaces where you can be able to pick up on reading some articles about camps and picking up on research gaps that you could be able to do an independent research. But the biggest question, even as I speak about technology and the work that we do and how that can be able to support women, is just thinking about how access to technology is really big, and how we want to make sure that if you're in a camp setting, if somebody is talking about your rights, a woman's rights in terms of being a refugee and what you can be able to access, how do you access that information in a way that's more accessible to you in the camp? So thinking about, if they don't have a phone, could we use the community radios? Could we use other medias for them to be able to find this information and they're not left out? So yeah.
Thank you so much, Julia. Wow, that was a big question, but you did an awesome effort at hitting all of the important spots. Thank you so much. Yes, from acquisition of skills to being able to communicate with each other to so many other things. And the research part of this look at women's empowerment, I think, is really, really important of what we're doing here. The next question is for Julia and, is for Mohadisa and Haley. So what has been the biggest challenge for you for your learning or working in this space? Mohadisa, you want to go first on that one?
Sure, I can take the stage. I want to talk about a few things. One of them is Julia already mentioned that spreading the information is one of the challenges that I have learned, that it's not quite easy, even though like we build a lot of social media. We are quite active in the social media about like the rights of the refugees, the rights of the women, and how they can continue their education, how they can change their diplomas and continue with their skilled jobs. But it's always not accessible for everyone. And that's one of the main challenges that we had, even though we tried to put posters, make different advertisements on the TV, but always there are like some points that it will not reach. And it's very sad moment for us to know that there are such good talents, such potentials, somewhere that they couldn't reach, they couldn't access this information, and the potential that they have, that they could join the community, be part of the society, is missing there. So we are like losing workforce and the skills that we can get from that person to join the community, and also for them to go higher and higher in the local or in the country. Also, another thing I wanted to discuss about, which is quite important, one of the biggest challenges is always government and political parties, which at some point we cannot control. I mean, I do a lot of advocacy. I talk for women, for Afghan girls, but especially talking about Afghanistan and Afghan girls, it's a very sensitive topic for me, because as we all know that now with the new government, they're not allowed to take part in any form of education, not even primary school, high school, higher education, university, or work in any industry or in any companies. So they're technically not taking any part in the community. And I think education, school is our primary right as a human, not woman, not man. It's as a human, it's our right. And they're not being given their right. And even though I talk and I speak, I try to encourage them, motivate them to stand up, but it's a very challenging situation right now, and it's not as easy as I thought it would be. So that's something I'm still trying, and we're, as a group of different refugees and Afghan advocates, we're all trying, but that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges we have.
Yeah, thank you, Mahadisa. We have to be mindful of that also, and how we can work together to bring that cause to the forefront in order to put pressure as much as we can. Haley, about challenges in this sector?
Yeah, one example, the standout example for me is when we spend time in Jordan distributing goats and talking to families. They live in kind of far-flung places, working on farms that are in the middle of the desert. The farms are fed by groundwater, so they can be quite isolated. We will go and talk to families, and they will say, like, please, we need education. We need schools here. And so it's tempting for us to provide a container or something and provide a school. But in the last, 10 years that Syrian refugees have been in Jordan, we have seen that that in the beginning, in the first 5 years or so, a lot of organizations came in and put in schools, but they didn't provide a sustainable strategy for keeping teachers there. In fact, one of the biggest problems was that teachers, like Jordanian teachers, their cars couldn't handle all of the desert bumpy roads and things like that. And so a lot of schools just are empty. And so the Ministry of Education of Jordan actually approached us, and they said, well, we have a solution to this. All these families out there that their families need education. We can bus them to schools, but the problem is that the schools are at absolute capacity. And especially the girls' schools, they're at capacity. And so they said, how can we fix the solution, or how we can fix this problem? What's the solution? And the solution is just extra classrooms. And so rather than putting classrooms in the little refugee clusters in the Jordanian desert, we've put them in on school property. And so they can actually enroll more students. And the ministry provides teachers, and the teachers are often female, and they're amazing people. So we've been able to sit in on some classes for girls that never would have been able to be at school. Another challenge is back in Greece at our community center. We do have, while we have a lot of women who come to our space, we know that there are many women in the camps, because we can't go into the camps, right? There are that 1,200 people in the camps right now. We know there are women who would like to come to our center, but can't, or they feel like they can't because they're busy taking care of children or taking care of their families, taking care of their husbands, right? And so we're trying to find ways to get them out, and so they actually can spend time relaxing and enjoying and healing. And also at the community center, we have quite a few older women who really want to learn German because most Yazidis are going to Germany. But they are completely illiterate, like they can't read in Kurmanji or Arabic. And so we've had to, in the past few years, develop a program and ask a lot of experts, how do you teach with older women who, like when you're older, it's hard to learn a language, literacy. And so that's something that we've been tackling and pretty successfully. And yeah, those are just some of the challenges. That's the tip of the iceberg, but yeah.
Thank you, Haley. Yeah, I think when we look at what is necessary and then look for the solutions. When a number of years ago, I was doing my doctorate and was studying comparative and international education and looking at some of the larger organizations who do wonderful work around the world. But what happens sometimes is what you mentioned about education, is that they bring in something that they believe will be helpful, and it is temporarily while they're there. And then when they leave, it's not sustainable. So actually having the idea that the larger organizations partner with the local people to come up with the solutions, which is what this summit is all about, is let's all sit down at the table and not be siloed, and let's really delve into how can we all work together, because we're all in it for the people. How can we make sure that we sort of do the kinds of things and solve the problems and overcome the challenges, and do it as a group who really wants to make these changes. And so that's where the summit is headed. The last question, actually, before we take audience questions, is to Julia and Olivia. It's based on your experience or experiences. What are your recommendations for improving the educational opportunities for women and girls and their future prospects for work? Julia, do you want to go first on that? And then Olivia can follow up.
Sure. That's also like a really big question. And I think as we come to an end, just thinking about some of the issues that we've been talking about. So one of the recommendations based on my experience is that it's not only for women to take a lead in advocacy, but also how do we bring men into this conversation? So, for example, the women and girls would really be interested in accessing education opportunity. And it's really not necessarily whether these opportunities are available, because I think the opportunities are there, but thinking about other challenges that might be around that. So thinking about a girl whose family doesn't want her to be educated. So how do we sensitize and advocate with other leaders in terms of why is it important for this woman to be educated, and how do we have this conversation in a way that's not dehumanizing the other person, but giving dignity to both of them. So I think it's really important for us to have a conversation, not just with the women themselves, but bringing the men along in terms of having this conversation. The second recommendation is just thinking about research and knowledge production. So really being able to understand where the gaps are and where the challenges are, especially when you're thinking about doing a project. I think we spoke about a needs assessment and how that is important, but also thinking about how you bring the community together with you as you do the needs assessment. So can the community help you with the mapping? What are some of the things that are really important to them? And especially when you're thinking about the displaced people, they need to be part of the problem and they need to be part of the solutions. And that could really help in terms of creating a sustainable project for them. them, and also just thinking about how you give more resources. There's a lot of push around the refugee-led organizations where the refugees have done research and they've identified these amazing projects that they can be able to do to change their lives and those their sisters, their brothers, but they cannot do this on their own. So they really need support in terms of resources, in terms of funding. So how do we push funding to go towards those people that really need to be able to support their communities and change their lives? I think another important thing is just thinking of the intersectional lens and not just a one-size-fits-all. So when we think about women, we can all speak about our experiences and our challenges, which can be very similar, but they can also be different. So, for example, a refugee woman in the Kakuma camp might be totally different from a Syrian refugee woman. So how do we bring these elements together that affect us differently, like race, and come up with solutions that are really inclusive of the different spaces, whether it's in Kakuma or it's in Syria, and making sure that everybody feels that as much as we're going the same challenges, you might need to have different approaches to the different settings. Two last ones, really thinking about foundational activities, especially when it comes to women. When we think about displaced women, and I'm just thinking about my own self, where my self-confidence, my self-esteem was definitely finished. And the only way that I could be able to build myself was through personal development trainings, healing circles where I could connect with other women. And that really gave me my confidence back. And when I got the opportunity to access higher education, it really became so easier for me to transition. So thinking about women that have not been in any formal or informal education settings, and how do we set them up for success? And lastly, thinking about mental health, I think we spoke about this way, because you've been, as a displaced person, you've really been through very traumatic experiences. If somebody comes to you with an educational opportunity, you might take it because you're desperate. But once you get there, you actually find that you're struggling with that. And it's really because you've not dealt with a lot of things that you've been through. So really providing a space where, whether it's through healing circles, trauma-informed workshops, where you actually deal with yourself first and the things that you've been through. And once you get that education opportunity, it becomes really easier for you because you've already built your confidence, you've already made peace with where you are. And it's not just being defined by being a refugee. There is more beyond that, because there's a person beyond that name. And lastly, I definitely believe, like all of us here, we've got a voice. We've managed to get a voice in one way or the other. And how do we use that to demand education, access to education to all the other women and girls? Because once they have access to education, then they can actually have their own voices. And you can imagine, if we all get that voice, how far we can go and how we can continue empowering, especially the young girls as they transition into becoming women. So those are just a few recommendations.
Those are terrific, and I think it's really important what you talked about in terms of there are people who migrants we often look at share similar experiences in terms of where they started and where they ended up, but the fact that it needs to be contextualized to their particular circumstance, I think, is really, really important. And that's definitely a theme here. So Olivia, go ahead and make your recommendation. Please don't feel you're short on time, because we still have about 10 minutes left. So go ahead.
Thank you. I think would like to echo what many of my co-panelists have said, because that's what I've seen in our experience as well, even if we have seen it in maybe slightly different ways. I think the first thing is to echo what Julia said, about making sure that you bring families on the woman's journey. If you can convince their family that their education, their development is good for them, you're turning them also into somebody who can advocate for many other people. And equally, to bring the wider community on the journey, we so often place the burden of integration on migrants and refugees themselves, who are the people who often have lost their confidence and have the fewest resources in order to integrate. As communities, we have to to really commit to making people feel welcome and to ease their transition and help them to thrive. And we have that responsibility. I think we've heard a lot, and it's definitely been our experience again, that a one-size-fits-all approach to education doesn't work. You have to look at what, the context is. You also have, and that's not just the programs you're offering, but also the ways that you're offering them, the ways that you're making people feel welcome, the pedagogies that you're using that speak to the fact that the women in your classroom may, as we've heard today, be hugely well educated and immensely professionally experienced, or they may be functionally literate in their own language. And you need to make sure that you are, helping people where they actually are, and also giving them the opportunity to be motivated to return to that setting, which is really important. And a social role, often, the role of tea is so important in making us feel that we're part of community. I think also Julia mentioned the importance of tech. And we've seen that there's been such a great push for tech as a solution to the learning problems of refugees and migrant women, and that for some people it's brilliant, but we can't forget that for many people it's not their learning style. They may not have a quiet place to learn at home, they may be digitally excluded, they may not have data. Some of the girls we know in our projects, if they're at home, someone is expecting them to do a chore. So we have to be realistic about what tech can solve and what tech can't solve. And I think we have to see also that sometimes learning isn't the destination, it's part of the women's journey. And for us, this is why mentoring is so important. We know that to different levels, women have experienced trauma who are coming into our projects, and having a mentor to accompany them and to help them to regain or develop the agency that they have, to set goals and to work towards them, is hugely important. We use a system called Empath, and it's designed, particularly to look at how traumatic experiences affect the way that we think, and the way that we address our challenges in life. We really have to remember that everybody is an individual and everybody matters. And I think to have at the end, as one of our goals, and coming back to the theme of dignity that we've spoken about today, this sense that we want every woman to leave our projects feeling that she is significant and that she matters. And even if she didn't learn and progress in her language learning today, and even if she didn't improve her skills or anything, that she matters and the world is a better place for her being in it. And that's where I would like to end.
Thank you, Olivia. Yeah, all very, very important. We've really looked at, throughout the last almost 90 minutes, a very comprehensive look at how we can ensure the dignity and empowerment of women and all who are in migration, who are displaced. And as a result of really looking at the women's situation and girls' situation, really ensuring that everybody benefits, both mental health wise, economically, socially, and educationally. I think it's really, really important. And it was a wonderful balance to see it from the research side, from the organizational side in the field, and also from the refugee voices side. Again, like I said, the panel happened organically. And so this was a wonderful balance of voices to be able to add to the conversation. And for those of you who are attending, I hope that we've got a lot more information. Camilla, are there any questions or comments or things that came up over the course of the last bit of time?
So I don't think we have any questions. Lots of comments supporting everyone's work. And yeah, I really congratulate you all for the awesome work you're doing in the field. So yeah, we still have 4 more minutes. So I think we have time for one more question if there's anyone around there that wants to write it on the chat, or you can even unmute yourself and start the conversation.
Right, yeah. And if there's nobody from the audience who has a question, but we welcome questions from the audience. if there are any final thoughts from our panelists, things that you thought of and that maybe you thought you didn't have time to talk about. As Camilla said, we have about 3 or 4 minutes left before we finish.
I actually I don't have, it's not a question, it's more like a reflection that I really resonate with, like some of the comments that our panelists did in terms of sometimes the pressure of not being able to do more, though we are doing a lot, and so, as Haley was mentioning, you're focusing in all these amazing projects and people are coming to you in need of extra support in relation to education, to safety. And, in React, we develop educational programs, education to employment pathways, but sometimes we really see, the need of adding psychosocial support and adding new programs and collaborations and this and that. And so I think, as women, sometimes we have that pressure of doing all that it's at our disposal, and sometimes it's very challenging as we work, and especially in this vulnerable context. So yeah, I really appreciate everyone sharing the example, because I think we're not alone in this, and we're kind of experiencing the same in independent projects too.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to what everybody talked about, which was the mental health aspect, is checking ourselves and making sure that we stay healthy and in a healthy place as we work through, because there's a lot that we hear and a lot that we experience as a result of of working within this within this space. Again, a couple minutes left. Yeah, go ahead.
I would add to piggyback off Camilla's amazing thought is also, I think oftentimes our supporters don't often think about the burden of fundraising and the constant stress of wanting to do more, but really restricted by budget. And for some nonprofits, you really don't know what your budget is going to be from year to year. The money coming in can be up and down. And that's something that is incredibly burdensome for me, at least personally, to go to, I was just in Turkey, seeing some of the destruction. We set up a partnership there. And I was convinced that showing the images of Turkey and some of the experiences and anecdotes would bring more money in. I was just convinced. I was standing there, I was seeing it, and I was trying my best to use creative writing or just video. And while the response was good, it was not as much as I thought. And so that can be really hard too, is to balance being able to help people, but also you have to depend on other people who will give you money or not give you money.
Yes, that having supported for several years number of organizations and also individuals in Kakuma who have their own organizations. I understand that the fundraising is something that you want to be sustainable, and you also want to have programs, and it's often difficult. Well, this is the last thing. In closing, I want to thank everyone who for attending. A recording of today's session will be captioned and published on the Migration Summit YouTube channel. If you would like to get in touch with the panelists, kindly use the email address migrationsummit@mit.edu. You can see it in the chat as well. We invite you to register and join us for our future sessions. This is just the first part of the first week, so there's plenty more to come throughout the month of April, especially for the next session, which is Higher Education as a Pathway to Voluntary Repatriation, happening today from 11 to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, an evaluation of the impact of higher education on refugees' ability to return home, as well as Silver Bullets and Sleeping Giants, which is such an interesting title. A discussion about how the value of inclusion in the process of learning is not only an important virtue, but important for outcomes. And that's at 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today. And again, thank you all very much. And thank you to my note taker and my tech support, Camilla and Marika. And for the panelists, Olivia, Julia, Haley, and Mohadissa, I hope someday we get to meet in real life. And thank you to all the attendees. Appreciate it. And see you in future sessions this month.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you.